This is Dale Wetzel. I'm the host of the Legislature Today radio show. We're broadcasting this evening, tonight, live from the Peacock Alley in downtown Bismarck. The Peacock Alley is a bar and restaurant, and they serve all manner of victuals, and also they serve beverages to make you feel better after a hard day. And let me tell you about their specials this evening. If you happen to be in Bismarck and are inclined to visit a bar and restaurant this evening, we have $1 off BAMs. Now, BAM is an acronym. It stands for big. Well, the B stands for big, and the M stands for mug, and A stands for a three-letter word that describes one's posterior. And so you have $1 off a large quantity of beer, for example. You can enjoy that at the Peacock Alley Bar and Grill, and you also have $1 off hamburgers, which are quite excellent, as I am here to tell you from firsthand experience. First of all, we want to introduce our guests for this evening. We're going to be, in the first half hour of the show, we're going to be talking about a bill that will help North Dakota hospitals, particularly those in western North Dakota, recoup some of their bad debt losses from patients who come in and are treated for injuries sustained on the job sometimes. And they're treated for injuries and they can't pay their bills or skip out on their bills. The problem of bad debts at western North Dakota hospitals in particular has become quite an acute problem. We're going to be discussing that issue with three gentlemen who are with us this evening. They are Representative Rick Holman. He's a Democrat from Mayville. We have Senator John Andrist, who is a Republican from Crosby, and he represents the northwestern corner of North Dakota, where a great deal of oil development is going on. And we also have Representative John Nelson, a Republican from Rugby. We'll speak to these three gentlemen in a moment. First, let me tell you about what went on in the legislature today. Some capsule summaries of things that happened. One of the things that happened today is that the House defeated a proposal to raise the cigarette tax from 44 cents a pack to $1 a pack. Now, this lost 72 to 19. It lost rather decisively. This would have raised about $60 million in new revenue. And we'll talk about this later because the bill that I referred to earlier, the bad debt relief bill for hospitals, will get its money from tobacco tax revenues. The cigarette tax in North Dakota hasn't gone up since 1993, and the last serious attempt to raise it was a decade ago by John Hoeven, who was the governor at the time. At the time, the state budget was in a bit more serious straits than it is now. That's putting it mildly. And even then, the legislature, which was controlled by Republicans, was reluctant to raise a tax of any kind, and the proposal by the governor to raise the cigarette tax was defeated. The North Dakota House also defeated a bill that was kind of notable in that it would have given workers' compensation benefits to first responders as compensation for their mental injuries as that might have occurred when they came upon a particularly traumatic or graphic medical situation. Workers' compensation benefits are not normally paid for mental injuries. They're paid for physical injuries. If you break your arm, you get work on the job, you get workers' compensation. If you see something horrific and are affected mentally by it, you don't get workers' compensation. This was an attempt to extend a bit of to extend workers' comp benefit to a particular situation where someone suffered a mental injury, particularly first responders who turn up at a particularly horrific accident or emergency that they have to respond to as part of their job. Well, this was defeated as well. The governor signed a bill today, his second bill of the session. It is a $720 million highway road construction bill. This will provide $600 million for western North Dakota during the during the next 2 years. The reason this is notable is that budget bills normally take effect in July of the year that the legislature meets. This bill is intended to give a jump start to road construction this spring because it's been passed by the House and Senate by unanimous margins. There was no objection to the bill, and it had an emergency clause, which means it goes into effect immediately. The governor has signed the bill, so this bill is in effect. There's going to be $720 million available tonight for spending on road construction and repair. $600 million is going to western North Dakota. $100 million is earmarked for non-oil producing regions, and this will be split up amongst cities and counties and townships. This will allow the State Department of Transportation to bid projects right away, and that way we don't lose a construction season. As everyone who has lived in North Dakota for any period of time knows, the construction season is short. There's no time to be lost, especially when there's lots of road repair projects out there. Well, I'd like to turn our attention to the bill that was mentioned earlier. This is a bill that was introduced by Representative John Nelson. He's a Republican from Rugby, and it allows for it creates a fund that by which hospitals may approach this fund or try to get disbursements from this fund that have had an exceptional number of unpaid bills from oil accidents. I mean, this is a bit of an oversimplification because the bill doesn't mention oil accidents in particular, but that is the reason for the bill, is because we have medical treatment, increased demand for medical treatment in western North Dakota because of the influx of oil industry workers, and a lot of folks, or maybe not a lot, but some folks are leaving without paying their bills, and they have no insurance, and these hospitals are having to eat this cost. Representative Nelson, could you just talk about why you introduced this bill and what it's intended to do?
Well, first of all, Dale, thanks for the opportunity to visit with you tonight. The reason that this bill is before the legislature is I think it's time that, and we're in a position in the state that we direct the importance of health care from a statewide standpoint. I've thought of ways that we've had some tools in the past that we've been able to use for health care delivery type proposals, but one of the best vehicles we had for that was a community health trust fund, and with the passage of Measure 3 several years ago, the money that flowed into that account was earmarked for smoking cessation programs. So since that time, I've been looking for another vehicle. It just seems to me, given the fact that smoking and tobacco tax, what that cost has on the healthcare system, that this was an appropriate use of a dedicated fund. So the idea was to set up a trust fund, and it's called, if this bill passes, would be the Healthcare Delivery Trust Fund. Of that, in the projection for the next biennium is like nearly $58 million would flow into that account. And one of the proposals, and it's multifaceted. There's more than just this one issue, but of that. In that trust fund, this hospital debt relief fund would draw from that. So, and the whole idea behind that is just the explosion of bad debt across all the state. It's more acute in the western part of the state, Dale, but it's occurring at record levels throughout the state. And the 36 critical access hospitals that I'm most familiar with is experiencing some serious and dealings with that. In fact, if we don't do something from the state level, I'm afraid that we're going to start losing some hospitals.
How much money are we talking about here that would be in this fund?
In the bill, we are dedicating up to $20 million in this biennium. The analysis that's been done, and this is how it would work. That debt relief part of it. We went back to oil boom days, and we did a 3-year rolling average of the hospital debt in the acute, the outpatient, and clinical divisions of the hospitals in the state. And in that analysis in 2006, 7, and 8, it was determined that 2.7% of the gross charges were attributed to bad debt. So that would be the benchmark where the hospital would assume that first 2.7%. After that, the debt relief would kick in, and it would provide a grant to those hospitals for the percentage of bad debt that they're incurring above that 2.7%. The analysis the first analysis we saw would amount to $5.2 million in the first year of the biennium, but and all this data is collected in a cost report at the end of each calendar year, and the best guess is that it will double the second year because of what's been happening this past year. It's just exploding across the state.
So they have to eat the first 2.7% of their gross revenues in terms of bad debt?
Right. And as the 36 critical access hospitals in the state are all 501c3 hospitals, so that's part of the mission of these hospitals, that if somebody comes into the emergency room, for example, it's mandated by federal law that they stabilize the patient, and then if it's appropriate for testing or admission, they do that before any conversation about repayment can be made. After they're admitted, that's the first time that a hospital can actually discuss repayment with them. What's happening is, and I'll let Senator Andrus talk about his area, because that's probably the area that is experiencing the more acute problem.
Senator Andrus, to what extent are hospitals in your district having this difficulty? And first, can you tell us where is your district?
My district is the northwest corner. It's actually encompasses about 3.5 counties. Williams, without the center core part of Williston, Divide, Burke, and 8 townships plus Stanley and Montreal County. And there's 3 hospitals in my district, critical access hospitals, Stanley, Tioga, and Crosby. Watford City, I checked on them, and they've got the same story up there. And as John alluded to, and we're indebted to him for putting this concept together, they're really feeling pretty desperate. Crosby's debt, mostly from emergency room services, ballooned from $114,000 to $312,000 between 11 and 13. Stanley.
So it tripled.
Yeah. Tioga's went from $347,000 in 212 to $703,000. That's more than double. I didn't have the breakdown for Stanley and Watford City, but both of them in those 2 years had about $1 million in debt. And they're all telling the same story, is they've had a huge increase in the demand for emergency room services. There's so many people have followed the oil, so to speak, and have taken up jobs where they're uninsured. So if they have medical problems, and there's a lot of accidents, a lot of problems in the oil business, they have an accident, they wait and go in the emergency room, which is the most expensive care, because a hospital has to provide this for them. And they're desperate. In the case of Crosby, my hometown, they're trying to get a 1% sales tax, and they say this will only help, it won't take care of the whole problem. So that gives you an idea of how severe the problem is.
If these folks are being injured on the job, don't they have workers' comp? Doesn't workers' comp pay for their treatment?
If they are injured on the job, they would, yes. So it's probably people that have other medical problems. I maybe misstated that, I don't know. In most cases, I would think if they're injured on the job, they'd be covered by workforce safety. Either that or somebody's in violation for not paying the premiums.
Could you just describe the significance of a $300,000 bad debt for a hospital in Crosby.
Well, I'm not exactly sure. I didn't bring the financial figures, but Tioga and Stanley, of course, and Watford City are the real boom cities as far as critical access hospitals. They're probably the three busiest critical access hospitals in the state as far as oil workers are concerned. Crosby's not quite so severe, not quite so dependent on it, but its debt too is ballooned, and they just don't know where they're going to, how they're going to solve the problem.
Representative Holman, Representative Nelson mentioned that this problem is more acute in western North Dakota, but that it is a statewide problem. You represent a rural district in eastern North Dakota, and could you tell us what your interest in this bill is and how it affects facilities with which you're familiar?
I did check into this. Thank you, and thanks to John for bringing this forward, because the 36 critical access hospitals are a network throughout our state. They work together to provide health care, and it's important that we provide health care. And so we have to have a healthy system of critical access hospitals. And so just because there is more of a problem in the west does not mean that we are not concerned about it in the east. Yes, I live in the Mid-Valley between Fargo and Grand Forks. It's where our district is located. But we have to be concerned about the entire state. And when we see hospitals in the western part of the state having as much as a 30% increase in bad debt, we have to make sure that they are able to function, stay operating at a good level, and providing health care. That's really what we're about. We need to provide that health care. And we know, as the testimony came forward in some of these, in a couple of situations that we've had in the past week, the testimony says, as John alluded to, if someone shows up at the hospital, we treat them. We don't ask questions, we treat them. And so that initial response, which is required, can create bad debt, because we don't always know how the problem, whether that person is going to be able to come up with the money to cover the costs. And so we, as a network, the whole system has to help one another and make this thing work. And so that's part of why, again, that's why I got on it with John, because I think it's all part of the big picture of healthcare in North Dakota.
Representative Holman, are there particular hospitals with which you're familiar about which this is a difficulty, this problem with bad debt?
Probably not in the east so much, but in the west, as Senator Andrus pointed out, that's the testimony came. But there are isolated areas, and I won't name any, but that are struggling a little, and it might be a function of size or market area, that type of thing. But I think we really have to deal with what this situation is aimed at, and when we see that big bad debt going. So,
Representative Nelson, is $20 million going to take care of this problem? How much of a dent is it going to make in the problem?
Well, Dale, I think the first thing is, I think it will get us through this this biennium. You know, there's a couple of other proposals that are on the docket, so to speak, if the legislature is considering, and the hope is that this problem does begin to be addressed. But the thing that this bill brings forward is that we don't have time to wait for implementation of the Affordable Care Act, for example. Whether you philosophically like or dislike that particular bill, we don't know how that affects hospitals in North Dakota. And in the state of critical access hospitals today, that uncertainty puts them in more jeopardy if it is a negative effect. We do know in east of Highway 83, and most of the analysis that's been done has been west and east of Highway 83, that we're in Rugby, for example, we're seeing an explosion of bad debt as well. Now, what's happening there? We can't really get our arms around it, but my best guess would be that a number of employee health care plans are changing. There's higher deductibles and more copays that are being established in the last year or so, and some of the policyholders aren't able or are planning for that occurrence. There's more people just traveling through the state because of the growth in population, and they're high demand people. The ones that come through, whether it's in Mayville, Rugby, or Crosby, they stop and they utilize the emergency room. That's where the explosion is really taking place, is in the emergency room. So the thought process is that we need to address this now. If it will fold into the Medicaid expansion part of the provision that we're talking about in the legislature very well, because if that goes forward, some hospitals in the state will be relieved of some of this bad debt. But what I've looked at as numbers, that's going to occur mostly in the larger areas, in the PPS hospitals or the big six in the state. That's where they'd get their relief. I don't think you're going to see as much of relief in the critical access area. So it's a very complex issue, but it's to the point where we need to address this, and I think this bill does that.
Senator Andrus, does a fund of this nature, to what extent does it take the edge off the hospitals that you're familiar with? Or, I mean, how helpful is it to them?
I don't know. Dale, I haven't had access to the numbers or analyzed the collective bad debt of these critical. We should define for your listeners what critical access is. This is predominantly, or probably exclusively, the smaller hospitals that ordinarily keep patients for only 24 to 48 hours and then transfer them to a larger center if they need additional care. And as John alluded to, and Mark, this is almost all emergency room debt. You can do some screening in regular hospitals like other businesses, but the oil field workers have learned fast that you can't do any screening when you go into the emergency room, so they wait until dark and then go to the emergency room. They provide the information, the financial information, the contact information, address, and this is a story they all tell. They subsequently send out the bill, and the envelope comes back left no address.
Huh?
Yeah, undeliverable.
We've been speaking this evening with Senator John Andrus, whose voice you just heard. He's a Republican from Crosby. We've been speaking to Representative John Nelson, a Republican from Rugby, and Representative Rick Holman, a Democrat from from Mayville. Hello, everyone. This is Dale Wetzel. I'm the host of the Legislature Today radio program. We're broadcasting live from the Peacock Alley Bar and Grill in Bismarck, North Dakota, in downtown Bismarck. And we're going to be speaking about a bill in the second half hour of our program about requiring drug testing for people who apply to get food stamp or welfare benefits. These are referred to as supplemental nutrition and temporary assistance for needy families benefits, but they're more colloquially referred to as food stamps and welfare. We have with us this evening Representative Dennis Johnson. He's a Republican from Devils Lake. He is the primary sponsor of the bill. We have Senator Tom Campbell. He's a Republican from Grafton. He is a co-sponsor of the bill. And we have Representative Gail Mooney. She's a new Democratic House member from Cummings in Trail County in eastern North Dakota in the Red River Valley. And she is a member of the House Human Services Committee, which heard the bill today. First of all, Representative Johnson, could you just describe to us what the bill does and what your reasons were for introducing it?
Well, thank you, Dale, and good evening, folks. What I did here in 1385 was trying to create an incentive for folks to stay clean. And I think it was going back to most everyone in the workforce has to drug test and be subject to a spot test to stay employed. And I was just trying to create a program here so one would have to stay clean if you're going to participate in a program such as TANF and SNAP. Realize we may have some problems with the SNAP area, but when we put this bill together, it was to get the conversation going when we are around visiting communities and such, and this conversation comes up time and again. And so what I've done here is I see there's about 41 states that have moved similar types of legislation. 7 states have passed this type of legislation. And so I copied some of the better things from some of the states that have put this into place and practice, and realizing there's still some problems with the ones that have been put into place. But right now it's a conversation and see if this is something that can work in North Dakota. And like I said, trying to create an incentive to stay clean rather than a penalty for being dirty.
One of the things that is included in some of the other bills that you've mentioned that have been introduced in other states is that this requirement for a drug test is extended to Medicaid. Could you talk about why you decided not to put that into your own bill?
The reason I didn't want this extended to Medicaid is if you do test or if you're dirty with the test, you have the opportunity to go through Medicaid to get into a drug treatment program. I feel to get documentation that you've gone through the program, and you have the opportunity, rather than wait for another year before you can test again, you can retest in 6 months if you've documented you've gone through this program. So by not testing for Medicaid, I would feel that that'd be an opportunity. If it can or not, I'm not sure yet, because that's something the department will have to visit with. We just had the hearing today, so that's why I didn't want to do that.
Senator Campbell, could you just explain to folks why you signed on to this bill and why you think it's significant?
Thanks, Dale. Thanks for having me. Dennis came to me 2-3 weeks ago, and it was an absolute no-brainer. To me, I think we've enabled people long enough. The philosophy, the culture, we've enabled people to, not just people of all income levels, not just discriminating against the poor, but anybody from farmers receiving government payments to employees, truck drivers. Our truck drivers have to undergo random drug tests. And to me, it's just an absolute, like I said before, an absolute no-brainer, common sense, that if somebody of any level has something to hide, they would probably challenge this. And I think if they have money, of anybody of any age, any occupation, can afford to have drugs or buy alcohol or something like that, and they probably shouldn't be entitled to the drugs or something that they'd fail to test. And so I was excited, and I appreciate Dennis coming, because these are some of the things that I feel, and I don't care what some people feel. Maybe I'm too aggressive in voicing my opinion, but this is some of the stuff that I think I was elected to, and this is principles. I'm going to be, instead of politically correct, maybe biblically correct. This is not what God intended for us to do, to enable people to do things of this nature. So I feel very strong about this. I wasn't at the hearings. There's a lot of the detailed stuff I'm not familiar with, because we were busy in the Finance and Tax Committee this morning, but I'm glad that Dennis came to me, because I'm going to take a pretty firm stand in this.
Is part of your argument, sir, that when you go and get a private job and a private employment, that many employers require you to take a drug test before you start working for them?
Yes, we're in the over-the-road trucking business. We have to randomly have them take tests. The banking business, every industry that I'm involved with has to do random drug tests or pre-drug tests as an employer, so for them to take. So to me, why would we discriminate against and only single out a certain industry or a certain type of person not to take it? To me, it's like this is discriminating against the rest of us. Why wouldn't we? To me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Why wouldn't we? Common sense tells you, if you want to try to hide something like this, you got something to hide. And if you got something to hide and you're getting free money from the state or the federal government, then maybe you don't need welfare in the first place. So that's my stand on it.
Representative Mooney, you're a member of the House Human Services Committee. The House Human Services Committee held a hearing on this bill. Could you just describe the testimony that happened, and pro and con, although we've heard plenty of pro already, and just describe for us what your own feelings are about this bill after listening to the testimony?
Sure. The testimony, we had 2 that came in as proponents, and that would have been Representative Johnson, and then one of the other co-sponsors of the bill was on as well. And then following that, then we had a series of people who got up and testified, all in opposition of it. And they were people from State Department, from Social Services, and just a real variety of people who deal with this on a day-to-day, daily basis, and all of them speaking in opposition to the bill as it's written.
And what were their reasons for opposing the bill?
I think basically it's the premise that we are, by definition, the way that the bill is written, we're presupposing that people are going to be on drugs before they get to that door to ask for help. And so I think that's the starting place, guilt before any association, basically. And then a lot of discussion regarding who those people are. The discussion of, single mothers, very poor people. The people who are on TANF are some of our poorest people in North Dakota, and across the country. There was also a lot of discussion about the constitutionality of such a bill. The Fourth Amendment rights are a part of everybody's right, and this actually would go against that grain. And some of the states that have actually passed these types of laws have actually been challenged in court, and to date we only know of one that is not in litigation for that purpose of defending the Fourth Amendment rights. Another point that was brought up is there's also a presupposition that all the people who come to social services for TANF or any of the other programs that are available are simply young, and that's not the truth either. One of the fastest growing demographics for these types of programs is our 65 and older population. So there is that question, do you want your grandmother, do you want your mother, do you want your father going in and having to be submitted to go through a drug test? And I think that that's a very legitimate question to ask.
How invasive do you think a drug test is for someone who is coming in to apply for benefits?
Well, I think that the Constitution speaks to that first and foremost. And even SNAP does not allow for drug testing before you are able to receive any of the benefits. Now, there was discussion that took place as far as, okay, so what about if you were to create a program that might require random drug testing once the program has begun, as a way to rehabilitate or habilitate or to actually proactively help an individual or a family find a cleaner way of life. And I use cleaner loosely because I think that is really a definition that we all define for ourselves. So, but coming to the confines of a law, if that means that they are not going to be on controlled substances, we need to understand which controlled substances we're talking about. And we need to be sure that we know who we're testing and why we're testing them. If it's done after they're on the program, some of the people who got up and spoke, they actually didn't find that as objectionable, simply because now you've got people who are in the system, they are building relationships with them, they are getting them back into the workforce. There are requirements to keep people either in employment programs or educational programs while they're in TANF. So all this relationship building is going on. And to them, then it made sense, okay, now if you begin a process of random drug testing and that type of thing to help them stay moving into a forward momentum lifestyle, then they feel that accomplishes a greater goal.
So is it fair to say, Representative Mooney, that there's less opposition to drug testing in the context of someone who's already receiving benefits, and also if it's done randomly or perhaps with cause, if there's evidence that a person is using drugs?
Evidentiary and based on the idea that it's a part of the program. So if I go and sign up for a program knowing that a part of that program is that I may be subject to random tests, that is my option to do so, and I can do that. But now if I'm a single mom and have 2 or 3 kids or whatever my case might be, and I simply don't have the money to put out for a test, and this bill would require that I would have to put that money out first before, and if I tested out positively, I could be reimbursed. But let's be real about this. people who are poor don't have discretionary income. If they did, they wouldn't be looking for assistance. So we can make the judgment that perhaps they have discretionary money for things we don't agree upon, but really, is that our place to do it at the upfront, or is that our place to start doing that as more of a rehabilitative process?
Representative Johnson, one of the questions that comes up about this approach is, say, a mother with 2 children comes and applies for welfare benefits, and the mother fails the drug test. What then happens to the children?
In the bill, Dale, it states that a relative can take that drug test and pass it and deal with the benefits to the minors in the household 18 and under. If there's no relatives available in the immediate area, then a designee from the parent and the department agrees on, neighbor to also test clean, can handle the money for the dependents in the house. And you know, we talk about the random testing. That's why Michigan is in the court system, is because they have in their bill random testing, and that's why they are in courts, is because of that provision in law, and that's why we went back to the original first testing. There's other programs. I think of one back in our area of the state there on a reservation that has a next step program. States right in the number 3 in the rules of getting involved with the same type of program to qualify for TANF and stuff. Why they know right up front they have to drug test, and as they go through the program to get to the next levels of education, be it nursing or wherever they go, then when they get to the next level they test again. But rather than the spot checking, why it's as they go through the first time, so that they're aware of this. And I'm not trying to I can't say enough that the reason I want this bill is to create an incentive to stay clean. I'm not looking for the people who are doing drugs and stuff. If they know that they have to pass a drug test before they go in to apply, you know, certainly that $50 or whatever it's going to cost up front is expensive, but you know, if it's someone in my family or I would think there'd be somebody there could help out for the testing process and get this project done.
Senator Campbell, could you address the argument that a blanket testing provision for someone who's applying for food stamps, who's applying for welfare, if you're requiring someone to be tested for drugs when you may not have any evidence or even any suspicion whatsoever that this person is a drug user, and you're also requiring them to pay for the test, what do you think about the argument that that there should be some sort of suspicion that a person is using drugs in the first place before you require them to take a test, and also the fact that they have to pay for the test themselves?
Well, the way I understand it, if they take the test and they're clean, they get their money back. So that would address that. That'd give them a great incentive to be clean. And I think if they know that, this goes back to the basic. When I was a kid, when I came home, when I was living at home in junior high, and I knew my mother would test my breath, and that was a huge incentive for me not to drink. And it is, I think, that basic, that simple. It's called tough love. And I think in this day and age, the culture has enabled people and different groups to kind of forget about that. And I've been on our Grand Forks Rescue Mission Board for about 14, 15 years. I've been doing prison ministry. I've worked with these types of people. I went undercover in the Grand Forks Rescue Mission for 3 days 2 years ago as one of them. And I lived with them and I visited with them. And it was kind of scary what I discovered there, how we've enabled so many people to take advantage of different programs that we've enabled them. And I'm just kind of fed up with it. I'm tired of just sit back and being run over with a lot of the things that I respect you, Gail, for your opinion. I disagree with it, 180 degrees, but it just isn't right. This is just a common sense bill that if you're innocent, if you're clean, you should be the first person in front of the line with a great attitude that would want to take the test. If you're challenging it, don't want to come, it's like there's a reason. There's a reason when I came back when I was in 9th grade and was drinking with the boys. I came in late or I didn't come home. There was a reason why I tried to beat the system, and I didn't like it. But it was a good disciplinary process for me. It was tough love by my mother, and I respect her to this day because it taught me the rest of my life what I didn't want to choose to do.
If I understood you correctly earlier, you mentioned that you lived in the rescue mission or became a client of it in Grand Forks to essentially to view the goings-on, what happened?
I was on the board for 12 or 13 years and fairly involved, and I was just a little suspicious in some of the things, and so I went undercover. I didn't shave for a few weeks and down-dressed, and I went in and pretended to be one of them for a few days. And it was really alarming how when they think that you're one of them, what they will share with you. And about a third to 40% of the people there, we were just totally enabling. I will do everything in my power. The truly needy person, I will give, and I do give a lot of money and time, but the person that's trying to beat the system, that's just, we've enabled, and our society has done that. There's a lot of people that seem to want to ride the wagon more than pull it. And unless we try to stop this and combat this, I think our country is just going to continue to go down. The truly needy person that needs it, boy, I tell you, hats off, I'll do everything in my power. So I guess some people think I'm a cruel, vicious Republican businessman, but that's not true. I've got a very social, sensitive needs side of me, and I see these things, but I tell you what, I'm just not going to just lay down dead and just give out a hand free, because that's the problem we've had, I think, in this country, and I want to try to stop it as much as possible, because we're going the wrong direction.
I wanted you to elaborate a bit on what you saw. You said you saw things. What did you see?
People communicating why they came up there, had the system beat. We're supposed to, after 30 days, they're supposed to let them go, and but we were kind of pretty lax on our rules, and right away that's the circuit of the homeless. They know where to go and try to beat the system, and people that knew they had to take a DUI or a drug breathalyzer test at like 10:30, and they had the system down. They had their bottle of boozes hid, and they knew how many hours they had to be clean from like 4 o'clock in the afternoon to beat the breathalyzer. They had the system beat down, and it was just frustrating because these people were physically, mentally capable, and they had the system down for a free meal, free bed, and those are the kind of guys that I don't really appreciate. They're kind of our society. I just don't think, and you're always going to have those types of people, but by continuing to give them a handout and enabling them is not the path that I want to choose. I want to try to hold them accountable, and that's just me.
Representative Mooney, I wanted to ask you about the specific argument about in private business. Often, someone who goes to take a job at a private company, they're often asked or frankly required as a condition of employment to take a drug test. If that sort of requirement is fairly common in the private sector, then what is wrong with extending it to folks who apply to get public benefits?
Well, I think that first off, this isn't a job. I realize that there are instances of abuse out there in the world, and I think probably as long as the world's been in existence, that's probably been the case. But this isn't a job. This is somebody who needs help. And TANF specifically is created to help people get back on their feet. It's a specific period of time that they can be on it. The average is 6 to 9 months. The absolute maximum for a lifetime is 5 years. So TANF isn't something that they can get on and stay on for the rest of their lives, and it's not built to be in perpetuity. I also would suspect that most private industries, if they require you to take a drug test, they're probably paying for it as well. I can't believe, okay, I'm seeing a shaking of the head. But like in testimony today, I freely admit I have never been asked or forced to take a drug test for any reason. And if I were, I probably wouldn't work there. Now, that's not because I use drugs. I haven't used a drug except Tylenol PM since I can remember. What I'm saying is that I feel that if I have to be tested before I can be interviewed, before I can be given the opportunity to build a relationship, you probably don't want me working for you, and I probably don't want to be working here. So let's just not waste each other's time. That would be my reasoning, not because I have anything to hide. I have nothing to hide.
It's fair to say it's an affront to your dignity.
It's an affront to my dignity, and that's something I did want to get to, if I could, just based off of some of what I heard today and now. The abuses exist. There's no question about it. And will we ever agree 150%? Probably never. But I see a bill like this as being, number one, punitive and judgmental, and as stereotyping people. We're talking about a group of people and we're throwing them all into one big bag, and that is simply not the truth. We have all age levels, we have all income levels, we have all ability levels, we have people who have zero support systems, we have people who have marginal support systems, and some who have families who can and should be able to help, but for whatever reasons don't. And maybe that comes back to dignity. And so I guess part of this comes to, if we're going to take this program, and if we're going to zero in on whether or not this one deserves to be able to have the full benefit of being a benefit, then why are we stopping here? At what point do we not go on to all the entitlements? And to be sure, there are entitlements from the top all the way to the bottom in the United States government and the North Dakota government. So
we've been speaking this evening to Representative Gail Mooney, a Democrat from Cummings, whose voice you just heard. She's a member of the House Human Services Committee, which has been listening to a bill that would require folks who apply for welfare and food stamp benefits to take a drug test at their own expense before they could qualify to receive benefits. We've also been speaking this evening with Representative Dennis Johnson. He's a Republican from Devil's Lake, and he is the sponsor, the chief sponsor of this bill, which would require welfare and food stamp applicants to take a drug test. We've also been speaking to Senator Tom Campbell, a Republican from Grafton, who is a co-sponsor of this bill. And this bill was heard today in the House Human Services Committee. It will be debated in the committee at a later date, and the committee will make a recommendation as to whether the full House shall pass this bill. And that vote has not taken place yet. It will, I suppose, in the near future. Thank you, everyone, for coming and discussing this issue with us. I think it's been very enlightening.
it was a good conversation.
Thank you for this opportunity, Dale.
And we'll be back in a moment with our credit union hour. We'll be discussing some issues of interest to North Dakota credit unions.